Today we're going to actually start with our eyes open. So, because we're going to start from the most outward experience and we're going to turn inward. Because this whole appearance of subject object is strongest outside in what we call outside in the sense experience. And then we will see how, as we move inward, the very firm distinction and separation between the subject object starts to collapse. So take a look around in the room that you're sitting in. There's a very distinct sense of separation felt from the personal point of view, where the body is your center. The body is where you've established your sense of self. The body is you. The body is the subject I. And every sense object is something separate. It's not just limited to what you see through the eyesight. It also includes what you hear, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste. The five senses, the sense objects, are the world of physicality, distinct objects separate from the senses that perceive them, which are really sort of just taken to be the body as well. We don't really make a distinction between the body and the senses. The functioning of the senses we just attribute to the body. So when we say that we have established ourselves, our sense of self in the body, we have established our sense of self in the senses as well. So the eyesight is I, the hearing is I, the tasting, the touching, the smelling is I. The senses are the subject, and the sense objects are the objects. Very separate, very distinct. This is our personal paradigm. This is our personal worldview. If you close your eyes now, things shift around a little bit. Before the spiritual path, before self inquiry, we didn't necessarily explore this or recognize this. But now that we have the teaching in our lives, when we close our eyes, we can recognize that the subject object shift, because previously the eyes were the subject, I. But now the eyesight is gone. Yet I do not disappear. I, the subject, still am. But sort of it's unclear what that is. If anything, the eyes have become the object now because I see that the eyes are closed, that the eyes are not at the moment functioning, the eyesight. It's gone for the moment. So previously, eyesight was the subject, and now it has become the object. We can do the same investigation with the other senses too, but it's just easier with the eyesight. So just bear with me. Don't get too analytical. You can't really stop your hearing. So like that's why we practice this with the eyesight, but it really translates over into all other senses as well. Previously, when your eyes were open, and actually once again open them, you the eyes are the subject again, I, and the objects you see in the room around you are at a distance. Because they are at a distance, you're able to see them. But the eyes that are seeing, the eyes can't see themselves. So just like that, when you close your eyes, because actually the eyes are at a distance from you, they are not the subject. You are able to recognize that eyes are closed. Eyes have become the object now. Because they are at a distance from you in level of subtlety, you are able to recognize that eyesight was functioning, eyesight is no longer functioning. Eyes were open, eyes are closed. That means you are subtler than prior to the eyes. You are the subject, eyes are the object. But what is this subject? Here we can see that we believe the subject is still this person that I am. When your eyes are closed, you still feel, and we create an image and an idea, a story about this person that I am that is sitting here with this body that is still being felt, and this image I have of my face, this story of like this life that I've lived, this person who I think I am with this personality and these desires and this life that the person I think I'm living. So we have this mental image of ourselves. And on behalf of this mental image, we think in the voice of this mental image. Is it not true? So here, when the eyes are closed, you think that you, this mental image person, that you're sort of conceiving, that you are the subject and the eyes are the object. So this mental image, which is speaking in the form of thoughts, the thinking becomes the subject and the eyes become the object. Thinking becomes I, the subject. Eyes are the object. Even the body sensations that are being felt are the object because you see them. So it's like you think that I, this mental image person that is thinking, that is speaking in the form of thoughts, is the subject, and the body that I'm feeling is the object to me. When the eyes were open, the subject was a little more gross, right? More physical. It was the eyes. It had taken on that shape. Now the eyes are closed. The subject has receded into something more subtle, the process of thinking. The thinking has become I, the subject, and the senses and the body sensation have become the object. The body entirely, actually, yeah, has become the object. With all the functioning of the senses, they have become the object. There's still a very distinct separation between what I am, right, the subject, and the body and the senses. Now they are at a distance, they are the object perceived. Most people usually don't go beyond this step because the instruction doesn't ever really come in our experience. We are all very fortunate that this practice has graced us, that the truth is pulling at you, guiding you even more further inward. So now, this is the next step self inquiry asks us to take. You are to recognize that even this thinking process, which is parading around as the subject I, it is actually not I because it is also perceived. You are only able to perceive it because you are not that. You are only able to perceive it because it is also at a distance from you. You are at even a greater degree of subtlety than it. And from there, as that, you are perceiving it. So we are taking a subtler step. Just like before, when your eyes were open and the eyes were the subject, and the objects in the room that you were looking at was the object. You were able to see those objects because the eyes are not those objects. There's a distance between the eyes and the objects. So you're able to recognize them, you're able to see them. Then your eyes were closed. The eyes themselves became the object. The thinking that was subtler than the eyes became the subject. Because the thinking is subtler than and at a distance from the eyes, it is able to recognize it, see it, think about it. But now we're even taking it at a greater subtlety. We are recognizing that the thinking is also not the subject because it is also recognized, it is also perceived. I am the subject. I see thinking as the object. I see thinking coming, going. I do not come and go. Therefore, thinking is an object. Here you can see that all these thoughts about the person you are and the life you've lived, it's not the subject. It is also the object, perceived. It is not I. Here you are able to see every opinion, every belief, every idea about right and wrong is the object, not I. All these things you thought were you are not really you. It's a very freeing discovery in and of itself. But now that the thinking has become the object, it is unclear what the subject is. I know I am the perceiver of thinking, but it is quite unclear what that I is. This is where the collapse between the subject and the object starts to happen. If you take your looking, your knowing, subtler than thinking, this is where the collapse between the subject and the object starts to happen. If thoughts are arising right now and trying to understand this or create a theory about it or looking forward to something, let it go because you can't take your thoughts into this recognition. If anything, just when thoughts arise, once again, recognize yourself to be that which knows thought. Be interested in yourself, the subject. You know thought. You perceive it. You are subtler than it. Throughout this exercise, we always, as we went subtler, we were always able to recognize another object parading around as the subject. Before the eyes were parading around as the subject, then we're able to recognize that, subtler than the eyes are is this thinking process. But now when we see the thinking process is also parading around as a subject, but it's not really so. As we try to go subtler, there's nothing for us to find, right? We're not able to find anything else we can objectify. This self which knows the thinking process, which knows the body sensation, which knows the functioning of the five sense perceptions. All these things we can know because they are objects seen at a distance. But ourselves, we cannot find anything to objectify, anything to know, anything to perceive, anything we can feel is like separate, a distinct perceived object, able to be defined, labeled, seen, heard, tasted, touched, smelled, thought, felt. Here is where it starts to become clear to you how the self cannot be perceived as a sense perception, because sense perceptions themselves are perceived by self. Because they are at a distance, they are recognized. Because they are not you, you can see them, you can know them. Here's when you begin to recognize that you cannot be the thinking. Because thinking is at a distance, it can be perceived. Because it is not you, it can be known. Because it is an object, not self, it can be perceived, it can be recognized, it can be seen at a distance. But this is a self inquiry, right? We're interested in ourself. So here we can see that we don't know what the self is because we cannot really put any object to it. But you know that the self is because the self is perceiving. Self is perceiving. I am aware. That part we know for certain. The whole experience is being perceived. Perceived by what? Me. So this is not a theory. This is an undoubtable truth about your experience. I am. I, the subject, am. I, that which is unchanging self, am. But what is this unchanging self? Cannot really put an experience to, because all experiences I perceive at a distance, including the mind, including the whole story about the person that mind conceives I am. It's also an object. So here too, there's a distinct sense of subject object. I, the self, am. What I am, I don't know. Okay. But I know that I am. And all experiences, including that of the senses, the body, the mind, even the subtlest layers of mind like anticipation, desire, motive, are also objects. Still, there's a very distinct sense of subject object separation. This is where the teaching asks us to take a subtler step. Take a look at yourself, the subject. This is where the subject becomes the object, or the object is the subject because you are the one who you are concerned with. The subject is aware. And right now, the subject is trying to become aware of itself. So it is also the object of observation. This is where something interesting happens. Because the subject cannot be objectified. Because the subject cannot be perceived at a distance as an object. Because objects can only be perceived because they are not the subject, because they are at a distance. So, what happens when the subject becomes concerned with itself? I becomes concerned with itself, curious about itself. Who am I, right? What happens when I try to see myself, know myself, look at myself? You thinking about this? Or are you doing it? Friendly reminder. You can't think about this. It will not help you. Try to know yourself. Try to look at yourself. This is where you have to start embracing silence because at this depth of teaching, at this depth of practice, words cannot help. Concepts cannot take you there. It has to be direct perception, direct recognition, awareness of rather than thinking of. So you're trying to become aware of self. When you try to become aware of self, there is no more distinct subject, there is no more distinct object. When you try to become aware of self, you recognize you cannot know yourself as an object, yet You recognize that you are. You see that what you are, you cannot know, but that you are, you recognize. When you become aware of self, there's no distinct subject knowing an object. It is the subject recognizing I am. It is awareness being. I am. I awareness am. If you sit with this, you will see that while that recognition is present, there is no sense of distinct subject and object because awareness is not an individual locatable subject. The whole knower and known thing collapses into simply being, being knowing, which is ultimately one, not two. Your thoughts will arise and try to understand this or doubt this. It's of no use. Do it. Be aware of it. Practice it. That's what we are to do. Can't The more you think about this, the further you will go from this. Knowing that, care not for what thought says about this. Go there. Practice it. You, the subject, try to know yourself, right? We always talk about be aware of awareness, right? The subject is the object. The subject is awareness and is trying to know itself. So it's also the object. When the subject tries to know itself as the object, both subject and object cease to exist. All there is that which is being. As we sit with this, which by the way, that is our entire teaching and practice here. Subject knowing itself or subject looking at itself. That is the essence of this entire non-dual teaching in terms of practice. So as we practice this, a subtler step can also be recognized, but only through practice, only as recognition becomes subtler. So we can mention this, but I think most of our conversation, we will be covering the first, what we just covered, the subject knowing itself. As we sit with this, When, as this seeing starts to mature, we can then also take a subtler step and see that both the subject and the subject being the feeling of being conscious, the feeling of being an individual observer, and the object being the perceivable world. Both the subject and the object appear to that which is totally beyond any notion of individuality, any notion of being a somebody, any notion of even sort of a distinct subject. The closest example of this is when you sleep and both the distinct subject, which is consciousness, and the perceivable world, which is the object, they both subside, yet there is an awareness of it. But that awareness you can reflect on as and see is totally impersonal, totally beyond this feeling of individual observer, with nothing to claim as like being a somebody, knowing something. In that, call it pure knowing or pure awareness, both the subject, which is that reflected consciousness, and the perceivable world both appear in it. So it's like both the subject and object arise from the same source, which is beyond both, and they subside in that same source. You are that. And in the waking experience, you get to explore that. In the waking experience, the whole perceivable world appears, and the body and the person is the point of view through which that world is explored, just like a character. And within the body and like this person is the reflected consciousness, which is the sense of being a distinct individual observer. It's not that the observing is individual, is that it is reflected in individual items. Awareness is not individual. Even reflected awareness is not individual, but it can only be reflected in individual items. So here in the waking world, you get to explore yourself by looking at the distinct subject. This feeling of I am, this undoubtable fact of being aware. So our practice is I, the self, keep trying to look at myself. I, that which is aware, and being aware of myself. I am the subject. I am the object of my investigation. So awareness is the subject, awareness is the object. Of course, it cannot be really objectified, but here it is meaning the object of our investigation. So awareness, trying to know itself, or that which is aware, trying to know itself. Take yourself there, practice it, keep going there, keep visiting that. So putting a visual to it, you start out here as the body, the five senses and the body sensation, and you are looking at a world of objects. Body is the subject, senses are the subject, all sense object are the objects. And so we take a step subtler, right? Try to see what it means by going subtler. We see well, when we close our eyes, it becomes clear the eyes are actually the object. Even the body becomes the object, and there's a subtler me. But here, thoughts are parading around as the subject, I. This whole thinking process and has so many ideas of who you are and what life is and all these things you hold to be true. This whole thinking process becomes a subject, I, which is a whole idea of who I am, and the body becomes the object. But then we take another subtler step. Even thinking is observed at a distance. Thinking becomes the subject. Thinking becomes the object of which I am the subject. As we try to take a subtler step, there's nothing for us to find here. Our practice is you, the subject, try to know yourself. Knowing is inherent to you. Knowing is not something you are creating or doing. Knowing is your nature. So you, the subject that knows, try to see what you are. Take your knowing to yourself. So the subject knowing itself, you never know yourself as an object. You merely recognize the fact of being, the fact that you are, I am. Awareness, you cannot be aware of as an object. You merely recognize the beingness of awareness. This is just another way where there's another visual to it. What is called as inwardness. Previously, it's just outwardness, looking at thought, looking at the body, looking at the world. Now, our seeing, right? I is interested in itself. Take your looking inward, away from the physical, solid, perceivable world, away from the physical body, the senses, away inward from thought. What is prior to, subtler than all of these perceived objects that are being viewed at a distance? It is this distinct sense of being a subject, I, that which is aware, that which knows. So it's becoming interested and curious of itself. Who am I? Take your looking there, the looking that is so inherent to you, your knowing, your seeing that is so inherent to you. Look at yourself being. When you know yourself, in that moment of recognition, this whole thing is the whole subject object thing is it collapses.